The genius who saved the world and broke it, Fritz Haber, stood in his laboratory, surrounded by the gleaming apparatus of his mind's invention. The air thick with the smell of chemicals that would change the world. It was 1909, and he was on the verge of something monumental, the breakthrough that would earn him the Nobel Prize. A formula, a reaction. The secret to synthesizing ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen. On that day, in the sterile silence of his lab, Haber had unlocked the key to feeding millions. But it wouldn't stop there. The same genius that would save lives would also lead to the creation of a weapon that could destroy them. By 11 a.m., Haber had already built the foundation of modern fertilizer. His process, known as the Haber-Bosch method, would revolutionize agriculture, turning deserts into fields and feeding the growing population of the world. It was a moment of pure genius, the kind of scientific achievement that would define his legacy. He was hailed as a hero. His name whispered in the same breath as the titans of chemistry. But in the shadows of this triumph, something darker began to take shape. World War I was raging. It was 1915 when Haber's greatest tragedy was set into motion. The war had descended into a bloody stalemate, trench warfare consuming men by the millions, and the need for a breakthrough had never been greater. What Haber had once seen as a victory for life, an answer to the hunger of nations, was about to be weaponized. His knowledge of chemistry would be used for death. It started with a simple question. What if this chemical genius could create a gas that could wipe out entire battalions in minutes? A gas that would cripple the enemy before they even had the chance to fight. As the war dragged on, Haber, under the pressure of his country's war machine, turned his attention to chemical warfare. He convinced himself that his invention would be used only for good, to end the war swiftly, decisively. A way to break the stalemate. To save lives in the long run by shortening the bloodshed. By 9 p.m., Haber's laboratory was no longer a place of discovery, but one of destruction. He began experimenting with chlorine gas, then phosgene, and later mustard gas, chemicals that would maim, burn, and kill in unimaginable ways. Mind, once dedicated to feeding the world, had now become an instrument of warfare. He watched as the world he had helped build with his inventions fell apart. He watched as men were gassed to death, their lungs searing, their bodies convulsing, their skin blistering. The same scientist who had dreamed of saving lives had now become the architect of death. April 22, 1915, the first major chemical attack in history. The Germans, under Haber's guidance, released 150 tons of chlorine gas at the Second Battle of Ypres. The greenish-yellow cloud rolled across the battlefield, suffocating soldiers in their trenches, choking them on air so toxic it left nothing behind but the smell of death. For Haber, it was a triumph of science, a victory in the war. But for the world, it was a nightmare that would change the rules of warfare forever. At 2 a.m., the following night, Haber sat in his office, papers scattered across the desk. The weight of what he had done pressing down on him like a crushing weight. He had achieved the unthinkable, but at what cost? The gas worked. It had decimated the enemy. But as the war dragged on and the death toll mounted, Haber began to question himself. Was this the legacy he had dreamed of? The same man who had once given life to the world's fields with his fertilizer had now given death to the very men who fought for his country? But it wasn't over. His involvement in chemical warfare didn't end with chlorine gas. Over the next few years, he continued his work on new, more lethal chemical agents. It was a slippery slope, a path that led him further from the man he once was, and closer to the scientist who could no longer escape the consequences of his own brilliance. He had created weapons of mass destruction, and the world would never forget it. The war ended in 1918, but the guilt did not. It clung to him like a shadow, dark and unrelenting. By 1920, Haber found himself ostracized, both from the scientific community and from his country. His life, once filled with praise, was now filled with regret. The accolades he had once received for his work in fertilizer now seemed hollow. The world that had once hailed him as a hero now whispered his name with disdain. In the years that followed, Haber tried to atone for what he had done. In 1920, he fled Germany as the political climate grew more dangerous, eventually taking a position in England. But no matter how hard he worked, no matter how many lives he tried to save, the specter of his past followed him. The horrors he had unleashed could not be undone. As time went on, Haber's once celebrated name faded into obscurity. His chemical weapons, including mustard gas, became infamous for their brutality and their lingering effects on the human body. The very thing he had hoped would end the war and save lives had, in the end, scarred the world forever. He had created something that could not be undone. By 1934, Haber's health had begun to fail, his mind and body worn from the weight of the guilt that had consumed him. He died in relative obscurity, his legacy forever marked by the duality of his genius, the man who fed the world and the man who poisoned it. He was remembered not just for his Nobel Prize, not just for his contribution to agriculture, but for his role in creating weapons that brought death on an unimaginable scale. The story of Fritz Haber is a story of brilliance and tragedy, of a man who was both a savior and a destroyer. His life was a paradox, a chemist who gave the world the ability to feed itself, then gave it the tools to destroy itself. It's a reminder that the power of science is not inherently good or evil, but the way it's used, and by whom can change the world forever.